Hey everybody, Josh Ronquist here for Heavy Debriefings, and it is time for another episode of Heavy Debriefings, where this time I'll be looking at Obliviscaris, the Australian progressive death metal / progressive black metal band, who have taken the underground world by storm for well over a decade now since their first release, Portal of Eye, and it's so great to see that even with 4 albums, they have so much material that people love. And for myself, being a gigantic fan who somewhat became friends with the band and is now just a fan of the band again for reasons. But hey, let's get into that backwards marathon, starting with Portal of Eye. This is one of the greatest debut albums I've ever personally got to hear. I love everything about this, and of course, if you know anything about Neo, this is not really the first release. The band, it's not even the first time, if you really dig deep enough, the first time that you hear some of the songs on this album. They have been well crafted. Some changes have been made to these songs from the original versions of these, and from start to finish, it's just a masterpiece. And Plague Flowers the Kaleidoscope, the very first Obliviscaris song I ever heard, it still hits me to this day. This is the album where the band got the stigma that they really did not want to have, but when you listen to it, it's kind of unavoidable. The Opeth comparisons, because there's a lot of Opeth vibes going on here. A lot of people said Opeth with violins, which I think is a little too much. I think they are their own sound, but they were really showing their influences on this album, and that's not a bad thing. The band sounds confident. The band has amazing production on this album. There was so much going right with this particular album. It launched them into the world that we currently know them for, and I really can't find any fault with this album, but even with all of that said, I'm still giving it an A. I'm mainly doing that because their next album, 2014 Citadel, is not only their best work, not only the best work of the particular genres that they represent, but it's one of the greatest metal albums ever made. Everything on Citadel, from start to finish, is absolute perfection. And while it can be overbearing for a lot of people, especially if you're not into the proggier side, I think it's well worth the deep dive into it. There's so much going right with this particular album. They kind of shrugged off the Opeth flavorings on there. I think they knew that they had to do that to be able to stand out on their own a little bit more, and it was well worth it. The violins shine even more on this album. The clean vocals are spectacular. Of course, Tim Charles really knows what he's doing with the band and the lyrics and everything that he's able to accomplish with what he does in the band. And I even had a tapestry that used to be behind me that is no longer there, but I did get to see Obliviscaris a couple times during the Citadel touring cycle, both before and during, and I'm so thankful I got to. And one of my favorite memories, even if it is a little bit tarnished now, was getting to hang out with Obliviscaris on their tour bus when they were opening for Cradle of Filth. The venue they were playing at is absolutely horrendous, one of the worst in Minnesota, but it didn't matter to me because I loved seeing the band, and the fact that I got to see them as many times as I did made me quite happy. That experience of getting to do that interview, got to have a drink with them, just got to talk about stuff, and little inside baseball, I got to learn about the Patreon just a little bit. I believe it was even the day before it got announced when everything kind of shifted for the band, for better and for worse, depending on how you look at it. I got a little bit of inside baseball of knowing what was going to be going on there, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, this Citadel is one of the greatest albums ever made. It doesn't matter if it's metal, rock, any genre. It still makes me tear up every time I listen to it. The songs hit so impactfully, the production is superb, and I can't say enough great things about this album. Citadel is, of course, at an S. Urn is up next, and I'll keep personal feelings aside out of this. I'm just going to talk about the album. It does feel like a step down, and it does feel like that because there was a lot of whirlwind stuff going on here. Of course, the band was catching a lot of flack for their Patreon. It was brand new for a band to kind of do something like this, and now almost every band in the world does some kind of crowdsourcing in some way, shape, or form. So they were really ahead of their time being able to do that, and they were treated like martyrs for it. And I don't think it was warranted at all for all the backlash and hatred and all these things, because as we've learned in 2023 from streaming services, from merch cuts, boy, do I got some stories about that, and other things that go along with that. You know, bands only make so much money. And I think it was important for a band, especially a band on the rise like Obliviscaris, to tackle such a thing. Especially when they were growing so high and they were able to get so much attention that they did. And they really did deliver. There's a lot of bands that start with 3 syllables that don't give you what they offer when it comes to crowdsourcing. Obliviscaris did, and they still do from what I understand. And it's great that they continue on doing that because they deserve all the credit that they do. But when it comes to Earn, there was the crowdsourcing, there was lineup changes, which I don't need to go into the details of. It just feels like this was a really dark, depressing time for the band, even though the band was still on the rise. And it's unfortunate because not only does this album kind of represent kind of those bad times, and for a lot of things that was going on around with controversy, it does seem like it's kind of reflected on that. Now, don't get me completely wrong here. The songs are still good. The production is fantastic. Everyone is playing with such great conviction on this album, but if there had to be a last place album, it is Earn. And even with all of that said, even you can hear like the disappointment in my voice, I'm still gonna give this a B. And finally, the brand new album Exul. And this is coming out this Friday through Season of Mist. And I've had a lot of reservations going into this album for personal and musical reasons. I was really curious to see if time does heal all wounds, if time just makes things fade away, or if I could just be like a fan of the band again. And lo and behold, I think I have gotten to the point where I can appreciate the band for being the band again. And I think a huge part of that, if not the entire reason for that, is this is one of their best albums. And, you know, it's hard to say that with only 4 albums, but, I mean, it's easily in the top 3. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, it's only 4 albums. But yes, this is a massive improvement over Earn. I think they took some of the things that they learned from that album, and over the past 5, 6, 7 years, depending on how long they were doing the writing cycle for, they learned a lot of things, and this still is going to have a bit of a stigma to it. I don't mean just for me personally, I mean because of the fact that longtime member of the band, Dan Presslin, is now gone from the band. I know they're going to be announcing a new drummer soon. I'm not sure if it's just going to be a live drummer or if it's going to be a full-time replacement. I imagine they're going to be doing that at some point. But Dan Presslin is one of the most impressive drummers of all time, and if you need any proof of that, look at the previous past Obliviscaris albums to get my point. There's very few people who can do blasts and with such conviction and musicality the way that Dan Presslin can, the way that he can play odd time signatures and make them feel like he's doing an AC/DC beat, makes my jaw drop to this day. And his final recordings, or at least what I'm going to assume are the final recordings for Obliviscaris, unless he does like session work later, or maybe he rejoins. I'm talking out of my ass here, I don't know what's gonna happen. But let's just say this is the final recordings for Dan Presslin. He went out with a bang. He really plays for the music while still being able to show off his technical prowess. And as a former drummer myself, I'm flabbergasted at what he's able to pull off. Things that I always try to do in my own playing, he does it with such finesse. Tim, of course, is tackling a little bit more on this album. He's doing keys, he's doing a lot more for the band. It seems like he's really taken reign of what the band is about and seeing what he's capable of. It really worked out for the best. Again, like, this is a vast improvement over Earn, and it's great to see the band really accomplishing some great work here. My favorite song on the album is actually one of the shorter ones, and that's shocking to say, because even at one of the shorter lengths, it's still almost 9 minutes long. And I believe it's pronounced Graal, Graal. It could be Grail, but I think it's Graal. Regardless, I think that is my favorite song off the album. I think it conveys everything that the band is about, especially in 2023, in under 9 minutes. And I think it's a great normal song closer. There's one track after, which of course shows off Tim's magnificent violin work. But everything before the final track, I mean, it's just fantastic songs all the way through. You know, technically 5 songs, right around 50 minutes long. It's going to be a bit of a collar tug for some people. I can understand why, because apparently with generations that keep going by, they don't want to listen to songs that are over 3-4 minutes long, and this is not the band for you if you want that. If you're like me, if you still appreciate prog, if you still appreciate longer songs, if you appreciate movements in music, not just emotional movements, but actual movements and centerpieces and segments of songs that flow together and create a soundtrack album worthy of being a collection of songs to create an LP, this is the album for you. I honestly don't even need to snap my fingers, even though I'm going to do it right now. Don't need to do that because I am going to place this in the spot that I think it deserves, at an A. So let's go over this quickly here. Earn is in the lone spot at B, and yes, even with how tides have changed in so many different ways, I still consider the lowest ranking Obliviscaris album to be a B, which says a lot. Then it's the brand new album Exul, which comes out this Friday through Season of Mist. Then we got the legendary debut album Portal of Eye at the top of A, and of course the lone album at S, the absolute masterpiece magnum opus of Obliviscaris, until they are somehow able to manage to beat that, which I think they still have that in them. The 2014 masterwork Citadel. And there you go, folks, my look at the Obliviscaris LP discography. Of course, again, if you're a longtime fan, you know there's some releases that came before this, but these are the 4 official LPs that have come out under the name of Obliviscaris. Thank you very much for sticking around and checking all this out, and be sure to check out Exul, once again, coming out this Friday through Season of Mist. And until my next Backwards Marathon, top 10 list, interview, review, or any other kind of video I put up here on the Heavy Debriefings YouTube channel, this is Josh Runquist saying, see ya.